All right, you guys, here we are. We are on day 10. This is unit 9, day 10. We are completing the square, and let me remind you what we talked about in class yesterday. Our recipe. When we're completing the square, we are following a recipe, and these are the steps that we need to follow. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to go through as many as I can in the next 10 minutes to try and get you going, and then I'll have you do the rest on your own. And I am going to be referring to this recipe up here every single one that I do. I'm going to start with number 5 and look at the recipe. The very first thing says move the constant to the right side. Do you remember the word constant? We talked about that in class. Constant is the number that doesn't have any x's with it. So this has an x and this is x squared. So we're looking at this number. And it is already on the right-hand side of the equation. So I get to skip step 1. So I'm going right to step 2. Add a blank to each side. X squared minus 8x plus blank equals negative 15 plus blank. And I know what you're thinking, what is this blank about? I am just following the recipe, my friends, right here. Add the blank to each side. And number 3, how do I figure out what number goes in the blank? Do you remember what we talked about in class? We are going to take half of negative 8, which is negative 4, and we're going to square it. And that number, negative 4 times negative 4 gives me 16, is what you put in each blank. Okay, that is exactly what step 3 of the recipe says. Take half of the b term, that's half of this number that's with the x. We refer to it as b, and square it. Step 4 says factor the left into a parentheses squared, so that's awesome. Remember what we talked about in class is you can do this for this entire trinomial right here. Remember 16 goes on top and negative 8 goes on the bottom. You know how to come up with those two numbers, but there's a shortcut. What's pretty cool about the way you do this is we're going to factor the left-hand side into a parentheses squared. Sorry to keep zooming in and out, but I'm looking at step 4. Factor the left into a parentheses squared, so here it is. And how do I figure out what goes in the parentheses? Is it's x with this number, this one before you square it. And that's always how it's going to be for completing the square. So I'm going to put x minus 4 squared. The reason why that is, that's your shortcut. And what I said in class was that you guys could do this number is what goes here. And you can remember that. It's a shortcut. But again, if I'm going to take this right here, this trinomial, and I'm going to put the 16 on the top like we did all those other things in previous problems and previous days, and the negative 8 goes on the bottom, and I'm thinking to myself, what are those two numbers? They're both negative 4 and negative 4. And so that means I have x minus 4 2 times, or x minus 4 squared. There's your shortcut. It's this number right here. And that's how it's always going to be for these completing the square problems, where we're following the recipe. I'm going to combine these numbers. Negative 15 plus 16 is just 1, right? And from here, step 5, my last step tells me to square root both sides and then solve. We have already solved a bunch of problems that look just like this. In order to solve it, I'm going to square root both sides. And remember, when you square root a square, it goes away. So we're just left with x minus 4 on this side, which is great. And do you know what square root of 1 is? I know it's kind of weird, but don't forget the plus minus. But what's 1 times 1, you guys? It's just 1, right? Did you know that square root of 1 is 1? So now I can add 4 to both sides, so I can cancel and get the x by itself. And I get plus minus 1 plus 4. I think I can actually combine those because those are both numbers. So let's take the positive 1 first, plus 4, which gives me 5. And I'm also going to take the negative 1 plus 4, which gives me 3. Those are my two answers for x, 5 and 3. I'm going to follow the same exact recipe, and I'm going to apply that to this problem. Step 1, you can zoom out and go all the way to the top if you want to. I'm going to subtract the 85 because that's the constant term, and step 1 tells me that I need to move the constant term to the right-hand side. This step. The constant is the whole number without any x's. I need to move it over to the right-hand side. And in order to do that, because it is positive here, I need to cancel it by subtracting. So that's gone. I got x squared minus 18x. I'm also going to do step 2 here, which is adding a blank on each side. So these are gone. and I'm going to put my blank in. I combine 0 and negative 85, which is just negative 85, and put the blank in. All right, now what is half of negative 18, which is negative 9, and when I square it, I get 81. That is what goes in the blank on both sides. That is awesome. I'm just following my steps up at the top. I believe I'm now on step 4, which is factor the left-hand side into a parentheses squared. And remember, you're just going to use this number in the parentheses. It's x minus 9 times x minus 9, aka x minus 9 squared. And I can combine these numbers over here. Negative 85 plus 81 gives me negative 4. From here, the last step tells me to square root both sides. I'm going to square root this, which cancels my square. And on the left-hand side, I just have x minus 9. Don't forget the plus minus. I believe the I comes out, and I have root 4. And wait a second, root 4 is just 2. Okay, so it's actually going to be 2I. All right, last thing is to get the x by itself. I'm going to move the 9 over. I cannot combine an I with a whole number. Those are different. So I'm going to leave my answer as plus minus 2I plus 9. Just so you know, that is the exact same thing as positive 9 plus minus 2I. Those are the same. And in the case of a multiple choice test, or a multiple choice question, I want you to be able to recognize that these are both the exact same. The plus minus goes with the 2I, and the 9 is positive. Those are the exact same answer. You don't have to write both of them, but I want you to know that they are the same. Okay, cool. Let me try number 9. Following the recipe, step 1 is to move the constant term over to this side. And because it is minus, I'm going to add it to both sides. So I got x squared minus 12x. I'm going to put the blank in at the same time. I am going to combine my 3 and my 10, which makes 13. And I'm going to put the blank in on that side also. I'm going to take half of negative 12, which is negative 6, and squared gives me 36. Yes, negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. Step 4 tells me to factor the left-hand side into a parentheses squared. So how do I do that? I'm using this number, the negative 6. It's going to be x minus 6. And on this side, I'm going to combine my like terms. 13 plus 36, I believe that gives me 49. So that's awesome. Next, I'm square rooting both sides. When I square root a square, that cancels it. And I just have x minus 6 now. Don't forget the plus minus. 49 breaks down. It's actually 7 and 7. So that's cool. Now I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So I'm going to put plus minus 7 plus 6. Those are whole numbers. I can actually do that. I can actually combine those. So I'm going to do the positive 7 first, plus 6, which gives me 13. And now I'm going to do the negative 7 plus 6, which gives me negative 1. Those are my two answers. Let me try and get one more done, okay, you guys? Let me try 13. Step 1, following my recipe. I'm adding 15 on both sides. X squared plus 6x. I'm also going to put the blank in, which is step 2. I'm going to combine my 0 and 15, which gives me 15, and I'm putting a blank on this side also. All right, let's take half of 6, which is 3, and square it. Don't tell me it's 6. It's actually 9. 3 times 3 is 9. That's what goes in on each side. Step 4 on my recipe tells me to factor the left-hand side into a parentheses squared. And what number am I going to use? This one. X plus 3. And then I'm going to combine this over here. 15 plus 9. I believe that is 24. Now I'm going to square root both sides. That is what step 5 tells me to do. When I square root a square, that is what cancels the square, which is awesome. So I got x plus 3. Plus or minus root 24. I believe that breaks down. 6 and 4, 2 and 2, 2 and 3. Found a group of 2 that gets to bust out. And I have a 2 and a 3 that have to stay in, aka a 6. Remember, you multiply if they have to stay in. So I have x plus 3. How am I going to write this? Okay, the 2 came out. What I got circled, my group of 2. I have a 2 on the outside. And I have this 2 and this 3 on the inside, so 2 times 3 is 6. And I need to minus 3 from both sides. So I'm going to write x equals plus or minus 2 root 6 minus 3. And no, I cannot combine those because this has a radical and this is a whole number, so I have to leave my answer like that. I did 4 problems, you guys. Let's see if you can knock out the rest. You're doing great. Keep that recipe in mind. Follow the steps. Every single one is just the same way, okay? Let me know what questions you have. Love you all.